Hey, Cookies here, and this is a raid healing guide for Mistweaver Monk in patch 10.0.5. And we're going to start off by just talking about stat priority. So for stats, don't overthink it too much. You just want item level. Item level is always your best bet. Then after that, haste is going to be your best bet. And then after that, either crit or mastery. They're both fine. They both have different benefits. I'm not going to go too in depth about them. Essentially just worry about item level, then make sure that every piece of gear at that point that you're comparing at the same item level has haste on it, and the rest you really don't need to worry about. Next up, we're going to talk about talents and different talent builds for raiding as a Mistweaver Monk. And we're going to start off with the key talents. These are the talents that are usable across all of the main builds, and you'll pretty much always be seeing use out of, so you're going to want to understand these talents the most. And that's going to be Rising Mist, Ancient Teachings, and Invoke Chi. All right, so the three main builds that we're going to talk about is going to be what I would call the core build or the single target build. Then we have the Cleave build or the AoE build. And then lastly, we have the Sheilun's build. So the core build is what you're going to see probably the most of. You're pretty much going to bounce mostly between the single target and AoE build, and then the Sheilun's build is something that's newer that has been coming up, and it is something that you can just experiment with and see if you like the playstyle of it. But for the most part, I would start with the single target and AoE build, and it's really just as simple as it sounds. The single target build you're going to use whenever you're fighting one enemy. It is usable on AoE fights and stuff in the raid, but it's best used when it's just a single target fight. And what the single target build focuses on, as you can see here through the talent tree, don't worry too much about the monk specific tree. It's just going to be the Mistweaver specific talent side of the tree, which is the right side. So the single target build is primarily going to focus on Rising Mist and buffing our Chi right here through Invoker's Delight, Secret Infusion, and then we're pretty much just trying to keep as many talents as we can that will buff our Renewing Mist and help our tier set. Then all that happens when we switch over to the AoE talent build is we switch out some of these talents like Invoker's Delight and Secret Infusion to buff our Chi and our Thunder Focus Tea, and we instead switch that power into buffing Feline Stomp so that our abilities cleave the enemies that we're hitting, which then in turn buffs our Chi more in an AoE scenario than something like Secret Infusion and Invoker's Delight, since our abilities are able to cleave, which then empowers our Chi more, which allows us to get more cast off during our Chi. So the two builds pretty much do the same thing. We just want to empower our Renewing Mist and our Chi as much as we possibly can. And in single target, the way we do that is by increasing our haste dramatically and also buffing our Thunder Focus Tea. And then in the AoE build, we want to make sure that our Feline Stomp is empowering our abilities and making them cleave so that when we have our Chi out, it is increasing its power exponentially. Then the last build is actually going to take away some of the power we get from Feline Stomp and Upwelling, and we instead just switch that into having a short cooldown that we can press through Sheilun's Gift, which has actually no cooldown, but it does rely on generating clouds of mist, and then that gives us a unique buff every time we press it. So we can consider this basically like I would say like a 1 minute cooldown. I personally haven't played with Sheilun's Gift too much, but so far I've been using it on, I've been using this build in particular on the Broodkeeper fight, and I have found it to be pretty decent. So again, it's just something that allows more flexibility, so it's just something that you're going to have to try for yourself. But again, I would not try the Sheilun's Gift build until you understand the pros and cons of the single target and AoE build and what you're trying to accomplish with those, and then you can switch your focus over to the Sheilun's Gift build once you feel like trying something new and just kind of experimenting with new things. So next up, we're going to talk about our tier set bonus. With our 2-piece, our healing from Enveloping Mist, Essence Font, and Vivify is increased by 10% on targets with Renewing Mist. And our 4-set is going to make Essence Font and Vivify. Their healing is going to be increased by 10%, and our Renewing Mist on targets healed by Essence Font is extended by 1 second for each direct heal. So essentially what this means is this is the reason why we are trying to empower our Renewing Mist and our Thunder Focus Tea as much as possible, because our tier set, all of the power is packed into Renewing Mist. So the more Renewing Mist we can blanket out on the raid and have going consistently and upkeep throughout our cooldowns and our downtime and stuff like that, the more Renewing Mist we have going, the stronger and more powerful our just sustained healing is going to be. So the basic gameplay, to just break it down into as simple terms as I possibly can, it's going to be in order, pressing Renewing Mist on cooldown at all times. We want to keep Renewing Mist going as much as possible. Target selection really does not matter. It will min-max a little bit if you pick the right targets because of our mastery. But for the most part, just make sure you are pressing it on cooldown. Even if you press it on someone who already has it, it will cause the other one to bounce to someone else as long as somebody else in the raid is not full HP. So start off by just making sure that you're pressing Renewing Mist on anyone every time it's available. Don't let it ever be off cooldown and just sitting there. And then as you get better with it, you can then choose targets more specifically to people who have lower HP or that actually need healing or can benefit from the mastery and so on. Then our next priority in the rotation is going to be to use Vivacious Vivification procs every time they're available. Every time we see this, we should be using it because it allows us to instant cast a Vivify, which will cleave onto all targets that have our Renewing Mist on them. So what I did is I just tracked it through a weak aura, and then next up in our rotation is going to be using Rising Sun Kick on cooldown as much as possible, because this will extend our Renewing Mists that are all active and also heal all players with them, so it's almost the same thing as pressing of a Vivify. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we are upkeeping Ancient Teachings through Essence Font and Feline Stomp. One of the things that I did mention is with this Sheilun's Gift build, you get rid of Feline Stomp and Upwelling. So now all you do to upkeep your Ancient Teachings with this build is you just press Essence Font on cooldown. So every time Essence Font is available, you should just be hard casting it. You don't need to use your Thunder Focus Tea or anything with it. You're just pressing it, and that upkeeps the buff going. The reason that with the core builds, with the single target and AoE builds, we run Feline Stomp and Upwelling is because Upwelling makes us want to hold our Essence Font, which then would not allow us to upkeep our Ancient Teachings of the monastery. So what we do is we alternate between using an Upwelling, which is an Essence Font, and also alternating between a Feline Stomp. So it goes Feline Stomp, you're upkeeping the buff, then when you need to refresh your buff, Feline Stomp usually won't be back up, so you press a Essence Font, then you want to hold Essence Font, so then you press a Feline Stomp on the next one, and so on and so forth. You alternate back and forth between those two, and then when you run the Sheilun's Gift and you don't have these talents anymore, you don't have Feline Stomp, you're just pressing Essence Font every time it's available to upkeep that buff. All right, next up, we're going to talk about our Thunder Focus Tea usage, and it's really quite simple in Raid. When Upwelling is talented, we should be using it on Essence Font every single time because it halves the cast time of it, which really helps with how long the cast time is with Upwelling. So when you have Upwelling talented, always use Thunder Focus Tea and then Essence Font together. And then when you don't have Upwelling talented, which pretty much the only build right now that doesn't have Upwelling talented is the Sheilun's Gift build, you are then using it on Renewing Mist. And this is because it extends our Renewing Mist, which will help us get even more out on the raid, and it will also still give us the same stat, which is Haste, which is our best stat. Next up, we're going to talk about how to use our Chi-Ji and Yu'lon. They pretty much work the same way, whichever talent you're running, but Chi-Ji is by far the more popular option, so I'm primarily going to talk about that. So really, the way it works in simple terms is you're going to get to 3 stacks of Invoke Chi-Ji, which is a buff that you get while Chi-Ji is out whenever you press Rising Sun Kick, Blackout Kick, or Spinning Crane Kick. They all give you 1 stack, but with things like Teachings of the Monastery, you can make Blackout Kick gives you, it can give you 3 stacks all at once rather than having to build them up one at a time. So you're essentially using things like Rising Sun Kick and Teachings of the Monastery to get you to 3 stacks as fast as possible, and then pressing an essence or pressing a enveloping mist, and then you go back to building 3 stacks. Then you cast an enveloping mist. Go back to 3 stacks, enveloping mist. Go back to 3 stacks, enveloping mist. You really don't have to break it down into super specific terms of like what buttons you have to be pressing or doing. It's just get to 3 stacks as fast as you can, however you find to do that. Typically, it's by pressing 1 Rising Sun Kick, a Tiger Palm, and then a Blackout Kick. Or if you have the AoE build, you just press Blackout Kick if you're in an AoE scenario on your Phalanx Stomp, and it's going to instantly generate 3 stacks because your Blackout Kick cleaves while you're on your Phalanx Stomp, and so on. So I'm not going to break that down too much into detail. The basic idea that you need to understand is get to 3 stacks of Invoke Chi-Ji, then press Enveloping Mist. And what I like to do is when casting Enveloping Mist, I like to alternate between melee and range players to blanket the raid as much as I can in the Chi-Ji hot that Chi-Ji will throw out on nearby party members to whoever you target with the Enveloping Mist. So build 3 stacks, use Enveloping Mist on a melee. Build 3 stacks, use Enveloping Mist on a range. Build 3 stacks, use Enveloping Mist on a melee, and just keep going back and forth like that. All right, so you've gone through the guide, maybe you've come back, and now you want to improve a little bit further. So the next step is by using Warcraft logs and WoW Analyzer to improve and make sure that we are doing the best we possibly can at the most important concepts for this class. So starting off, we want to go to WoW Analyzer, and we just use a Warcraft logs link with us in it. And it can be any boss. It really does not matter. Just use one that you're confident in, that you did pretty well in. I am not confident that I did well in this one or not, but it is a mythic boss, so we will just see and use it as an example. And then what we're going to do is on WoW Analyzer, we just throw the link in, we go to ourself, then it's going to load up this thing. Sometimes you'll get a warning that says like, it's currently not supported or it's out of date. That's totally fine. We don't need it to be in date. We don't need to use all the tools that this has available to us. What we're trying to do is just see how well we're doing with Renewing Mist and Rising Sun Kick cast. So that will usually be somewhere in here. Use core abilities as often as possible. And we can see right here, Renewing Mist, 92%. The higher percent that is, the better. And then it also will show our Rising Sun Kick. And so that can be improved a little bit, 79%. It's still pretty good, but we do want to see that a little bit higher. So what you'll sometimes see is this very low, and that means that you could be keeping Renewing Mist on cooldown or Rising Sun Kick on cooldown more often. So that's the first step, is just using WoW Analyzer and seeing if it's yelling at you about the core abilities. That's very important. Then the next thing is seeing Vivacious Vivification usage. You can actually do this through WoW Analyzer. It'll show right here. But I think the easier way of doing this is actually going to Warcraft logs, or at least another way of doing this. So we just go to, this is the same fight. And then again, it doesn't matter what fight it is. Just use one where you think you're confident that you did pretty well, just to see how you did. Then you're going to find yourself. You click on your own name. And then we are going to go to buffs. And then we are going to go ahead and change the sources right here. All sources, we're going to change that to ourself, because that makes it to where it's only buffs that we give ourselves. And then we just want to find Vivacious Vivification. So that is going to be right here. We can just click on it, Vivacious Vivification, and there it is. So this will show us when we had Vivacious Vivification available and when we consumed it. So the biggest thing here is just finding where we had these very large windows of having Vivacious Vivification up, and we were not using it. So we were not pressing Vivify during these big windows. These smaller windows, like these all right here, these are all very, very good. This towards the middle, or this at the very beginning, is probably fine. It's probably because the raid wasn't taking that much damage, but honestly, 30 or this is 44 seconds of us not pressing a single Vivify. That's obviously not super ideal. And then right here, this is very good. This is what we want to see, is like these right here, where they're much smaller like this when we reset the zoom. But these bigger ones, this is where we go, okay, I need to be pressing Vivify more during these windows. So overall, I can look at this and go, okay, I need to be more aware of my procs and when I can press Vivify for free and instant cast. So that's the next biggest thing. And then another thing that we can improve on after this, after we've checked these things, again, this is in order of what's most important. The next thing is going to be buff uptime on Ancient Teachings. And we can do that very similarly to how we checked Vivacious Vivification. We just go to ourself on Warcraft logs. We exit out of everything else that we were currently on. We're going to go to buffs, then all sources. We click on ourself as the source. And then we just want to find, it would be Ancient Teachings is what we're looking for. So not Teachings of the Monastery. We want to find Ancient Teachings. So we're going to scroll down until we see Ancient Teachings. We click on it, and same exact thing, but this time we're looking for less gaps. So these gaps right here that we're seeing, this is very bad. But where there isn't any gaps and we're consistently keeping the buff going, that is very good. So 83% uptime on Ancient Teachings, I would say that's pretty solid. I would say above 80% should probably be your goal. Obviously, like 100% or near 100% should be your goal, but we should be striving for perfection, not actually trying to accomplish it. And I would say that's the most important things for improving further. After that, honestly, there's a lot you can dive into, but maybe we'll save that for another video. So I hope this video was helpful. I know it's a little bit different from your typical raid guide. I'm not just like reading through an Icy Veins or Wowhead guide, but I hope this was still helpful. I hope it made sense. Let me know what you think about it, if it worked out, and I'll keep making guides like this for all the other healers. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later.